Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We had a couple of technical issues. We're starting a minute or two late. We'll let everybody get in through the door, and then we will get started in about 1 minute. My name is David Forbes. I am the marketing manager at THIRA, and I'll be doing the introduction and managing the Q&A session for today. All right, in the interest of time, we will get started. So hello and welcome to this evening's webinar, Healing for the Holidays, Grieving During the Season of Celebration. Our presenter today is Dr. Kathryn Korslund, a world-renowned expert in dialectical behavior therapy. She currently serves as the Chief Clinical Officer at THIRA Health, which brings you today's presentation. THIRA Health is a mental health facility in downtown Bellevue that specializes in partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient programs for women, teen girls, and female-aligned individuals. THIRA's treatment programs are grounded in the foundation of dialectical behavior therapy, which is a well-researched and highly effective treatment for those who are at a high risk of suicide, engage in self-harm, or suffer from other complex problems such as eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and more. For more information about THIRA Health and its treatment options, please visit www.thirahealth.com. A few bookkeeping notes. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available on the THIRA Health website in a few days. You will receive an email with a link to the recording when it's available. During the presentation, all audience microphones will be muted and cameras will be turned off. At the conclusion of the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask your question. You may submit them at any time, but all will be held until the end of the presentation. We will try to answer as many as we can in the time allotted. Thank you again for your interest in today's presentation, and I will now turn it over to Dr. Korslund.
Thank you. Well, we've already had a moment to introduce me, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on in. We've got several things we want to accomplish today. And first, as we get rolling, I just want to say thank you for joining me on this topic. It is not an easy topic, but I'm hopeful and optimistic that at the end, some of these strategies from DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, might actually help address the compassion that we all need if we are grieving during the holidays, that we can better tolerate the distress that this season, as beautiful as it is, can bring when we're in grief and mourning, that there's some sort of soothing and comfort that I can offer to you if you are finding yourself in need right now, and that somehow I can teach you a way to balance mourning and celebration. So right into it, grief and mourning. These are not the easy topics. Let's pause to make sure that we're all clear on what they are. You know, grief and love go together. Grief itself is the emotional response, our private experience, our thoughts and our feelings about loss. And it's normative. There's no way to fight it off. It is just simply our reaction, physiological, emotional, some would even say spiritual, to when we do experience loss. And that love is intertwined with that. It's the price we pay for loving. And I know when you suffer a loss, you think, that's it, I'm done. Perhaps maybe it's too high of a price. Maybe I'd rather not pay it. And there can often be an urge to cut ourselves away from loving again, or to even turn off our ability to feel and experience love for those that are still here. Every human, it's a condition of being human, will at some point experience grief and loss. And it's just that we all experience it slightly differently. It's universal, but our path through it is unique. And we can't hold ourselves or those we care about to follow any preconceived idea about how we get through loss, how we grieve. Grief and sadness also have things in common, though again, they are not the same thing. People who are grieving absolutely feel sad, and yet people who are sad are not necessarily grieving. Grief is a complex experience. It has so many feelings and thoughts and physiology and expression, but it often includes shock. Even if we know that loss is coming, the moment of it often yields disbelief and shock, confusion, regret, anxiety, anger, and sadness, that hallmark piece of grief. And you may find yourself, fixating on the memories, thinking about things that you used to do or how you used to be, maybe even the events that led up to the loss, maybe worrying about the future. How will you come through this? Can you be present for those who still need you, your children, your parents, friends, and family? Worries about finances, worries about how to continue working, how to just carry on. All of this can flood us. So it's this complexity of grief. It's emotional, it's physiological, it's biological, thoughts, emotions, behaviors, they all come together. And they're all a natural outgrowth of this experience that kind of cascades down on us. And then it pauses and it repeats. So body, mind, and whole experience is a part of grief. You may have a hard time focusing on things. You may have a hard time remembering even the most simple of things that when you're not grieving are easy. You might have difficulty sleeping. You might have pain in the chest. You might have a lot of physiological sensations that go with grief. You might be oversleeping, undersleeping. You might have no energy, and you might have anxiety even about the next wave of grief, because grief comes in waves. There's moments where you might be surprised that you actually are feeling okay. And then you might feel guilt that you were feeling okay. It's all a part of the natural complexity of grief. Crying, mood swings, anger, apathy, all a natural part of grief. You might feel a yearning to seek out reminders of the thing that you've lost, or you might feel that your whole life is a study in avoidance to keep those things out of your awareness. You might find that you isolate, withdraw, or that you move and you want to really cling to the people who are important to you. There's just so many neurochemicals, hormones cascading through us that our brain is truly impacted in these various ways that all involve emotion regulation, involve our ability to do multiple complex and simple tasks. The whole wave of it is complex, and the whole experience of it is normal. There is no singular, unique path through grief. What engenders it? The common thinking is that grief is about the loss of a loved one, the death of a family member or friend. And this is absolutely true. And it's often one of the most common reasons why people are grieving, but it's certainly not the only one. Grief can come about at the end of a relationship, a betrayal, the loss of a life's dream, the life that you didn't have that you thought you would, the crumbling of something that you've built. It can be the loss of one's innocence, a treasured career path, a home, health status, maybe the loss of body functioning or cognitive capabilities, death of a pet. So many things can prompt loss. And with that loss can come grief. So don't judge yourself if you're finding that you are really feeling impacted at this point in our collective experience. COVID-19 has brought many of us unimagined losses, and those losses have come with grief. So let's talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions about grief. A lot of times people are expecting to go through those stages of grief, and we think about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who first wrote about the 5 stages of grieving. This came from helping people who were approaching the end of life and their own understanding of what it meant to face death. And there are certainly functions of those 5 stages that make sense for many people, but don't judge yourself if you're not following them. Everybody's journey, as I said, is unique. And often grief is cyclical. You think you maybe have started to come out of that shock and numb, only to discover that you're once again surprised by waking up and looking at the calendar and realizing that your loved one's not there, or that the job that you used to love is no longer there for you. Another thought is that pain will go away if you ignore it. That if you just ignore the thing that brought you pain, you will get through it faster. And you'll discover with me later that in fact, the only way through it is to go through it. Some people have the thought, if I talk about my pain, my grief, it's going to make it worse. And in fact, the research suggests to us that on your own terms, at your own pace, it's the sharing with trusted loved ones, your experience, your reflections, your memories, that is the way through. There's this notion that time will heal your wounds. Time doesn't heal it. With time, we build new relationship to ourselves, to the world, to our memories about the things that we've lost. So time is an important part, but time alone is not the path to healing. It's how we face it. Other people say, well, if you aren't crying, it means you're not really sad about it. So you must not have really lost much. And we all grieve differently. Some of us grieve with tears. Some of us grieve silently. Some of us grieve through poetry or our work. Tears doesn't define grief or the depth of one's loss. And lastly, there's this idea that somehow you're going to get over it, and that if you do, it means that you've forgotten something important, that you've forgotten your loss. I think the first thing to know is that we never really do get over it. And I know for some people listening, that might either sound surprising that a psychologist would say that, or it might sound terribly depressing. Here's the reality. We don't get over it, but we make room for the loss. We find a way to make meaning and to pay tribute and to honor the things that we no longer have. We make room for it to be a part of who we are and how we operate in the world. But we never truly forget it. We never can go back to something before the loss. We figure out a way to make meaning, to make tribute, to continue to love, and to move forward. So that's grief. So what's this word mourning? Mourning is the expression of all of that grief that is experienced inside. Mourning is active, or sometimes mourning is passive. When we cry or we talk to others about what we've lost, we're mourning. When we make a photo album, when we go to a grave site, when we light a candle, this is all the activities of mourning. It's the demonstration of what we feel. And it's a process. We cannot rush through it. Mourning allows us, though, to move towards making room. And mourning allows us to start to move towards some sort of hope, to feel differently, and the future. As I said, we all grieve and mourn differently, and culture is a big part of that. Different cultures have different expectations of how we grieve and how we mourn. Some cultures expect that you be very stoic and dignified in how you process your experience. And other cultures expect that you have raw displays of intense emotionality. Many ceremonies and traditions are about family, friends, and gatherings. Different traditions and customs focus on food and eating, which has a lot in common with the holidays. Prayer, religious ceremonies are often very important, and that also has a role in many of our holidays. And often all of these traditions are combined, And they're meant to give us comfort, and they're meant to help us heal. And it can be very challenging when you are actively grieving and or are in mourning during times of holiday. Now, I say actively grieving and in mourning, knowing that for some of us, the loss is very new. It's very recent. This may be the first holiday we're facing with a loss. And for others, the loss may be quite distant. And yet the holidays, because of their richness, reactivate those old feelings of grief and loss again. And sometimes we feel traumatized because they seem to come out of the blue. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why that might be. One is that our holiday experience, it's so rich in the full pageantry of what rituals are about. They're stimulating. They often do have sights and sounds and tastes, all of which activate our emotional system. And through that, an experience is instantly activated. Have you ever noticed how just even the smell of certain holiday foods can bring back memories of people, maybe people who are lost to us, a time in your life where you had that sense of comfort and security, the relationship that mattered to you, the career path that you were on? Just that instant will refresh that memory of the holiday, and with it follows that emotional experience of grief. This is part of what makes these holidays sometimes so difficult when you've lost something important. And there's so many features about our celebrations at the holidays that also are features of the way that we mourn those that we've lost. So these holidays can be very important because they help us step back and reconnect to what matters, and they can be very painful and challenging. So if they can be so painful and challenging, what's the upside? What's the benefit? Well, it's interesting. A lot of research actually has been done that shows us that holidays and other kind of celebration, the ritual, does bring us many psychological benefits. We step away from the ordinary. We step into the pageantry of how we celebrate. We often reconnect with people that we don't typically have time in our busy workday lives to sit back and visit with. We might travel great distances to connect with people that we don't normally socialize with. We step away from the everyday. I mean, for goodness sakes, if you celebrate Christmas, you bring a tree into your house. So there's many things that we do that really step away from the ordinary. And these rituals, they're familiar. They give us a sense of comfort and reliability. And again, when those rituals are paired with loss, those rituals can take on a new experience of not bringing comfort anymore. And in fact, just heightening something that feels very off, very out of sorts, and can intensify the experience of grief and mourning. So these traditions are important, whether they're private, personal traditions. Perhaps you go to the synagogue, perhaps you go to church. Maybe they're family traditions. You get your Christmas tree at the same tree lot every year, or maybe they're social or societal traditions where we all celebrate Independence Day on the 4th of July. Whatever they may be, these holiday rituals give us a sense of social ties and also point out to us that these are special, unique, cherished times. And again, that helps to start to punctuate how it can be so difficult when something is off and different. Because what we know is with the holidays, the unstated expectation, the painful reality of this is that everyone will be happy during these times of celebration. So what happens if you're not? What happens if you're grieving? How do you live up to the expectations of everyone around you that this is a season of joy. How do we grieve during the holidays? These memories of joyful times can serve as just constant reminders of loss. You hear the music of holiday ritual and it catapults you to the time where your loved one was there. It reminds you of that point in your life where you had all of your physical function. It's all of those associations just surge right through the holidays. We can't help but be more awake to those things. You know, this time of year with its variety of holidays, we have Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah and Ramadan and Kwanzaa and New Year's Day. They're all right here and they're all right in a row. And that can also make it difficult, just the sheer volume of holidays we need to walk through. So if you should feel some resistance to the celebratory mood, or you feel that there's an expectation that you step up to, know that you simply don't need to. And I'm going to give you some strategies for how to make space for yourself to honor the grief within the context of the holiday. And everyone around you, their reactions to you being sad and appearing miserable can sometimes then bring guilt on top of the grief we already feel. So sometimes our grief even intensifies, either while we try to fight it or whether we try to honor it. So hopefully I can help offer some strategies for coping with the grief. One thing to keep in mind, grief, as painful as it is, it's normative and it can't be eliminated, nor should it be. And what I mean by that is it has a function. Grief communicates to us that what we've lost matters, that it's worth honoring. And to try to bypass that or wall it off or act like it's not important, that's a disservice to you. And it's a disservice to the memory of that or who you've lost. That said, the grip that grief has on us can be lessened. And I'm going to offer you some concepts, philosophy, and some strategies from dialectical behavior therapy that you might find helpful. So we're going to start with dialectics, the D in DBT of dialectical behavior therapy. Dialectics is a worldview, a philosophy. Interestingly, it's been the undercurrent philosophy of science for the last 150 years. It shows up in many applications, therapy, DBT being one, but it also shows up in understanding of relationship dynamics, of communication patterns. And if you're thinking back to maybe a college course you took in economics, yes, it does also have applications in Marxist economy. So what do we actually mean here? So dialectical worldview really is this notion that the world is made up of opposites, that there are points and counterpoints, and that this is just the natural fabric of the universe. You know, one dialectic within the concept of grieving is that you might be profoundly needing to experience the pain of what you've lost and also needing to hold on to what you've lost. So it's both recognition of what is and what isn't at the same time. Another example is both feeling joy at the memory of maybe a holiday past and the pain of the holiday present where that loved one is not there. Both things are true. So from a dialectical worldview, everything is holistic, everything is interconnected, and seemingly contradictory things like joy and pain can be experienced at the same time. The change in this worldview is the only constant. that therefore experience is emergent, meaning that grief will come in waves, and that every time we think and reflect on the past or think about the future, we are changed because every moment is new. If you think about it, you've never had this moment before, or this moment, or this moment, that each moment is new. And that we both change and are changed through each transaction we have in the world and those in it. So the world changes us and we change the world. And once we're changed, we're now a new influence on the world again. So everything is in ebb and flow, shift and change. And that all of nature, just the very essence of the universe, has this eternal coming into being and passing away. Transactions yield our new nature. This, of course, is very true about the activity of grieving. Everything is transacting, everything is coming into being and passing away. So everything changes. Change is the only constant. So if you feel like you just got lost in all of that, that it sounds a little bit like, gazing at your navel, don't worry, we're going to get a little bit more concrete. So we're going to take this worldview and we're going to apply it to grief, mourning, and celebration. So grief and mourning, as we said earlier, grief being your experience, mourning being the outward demonstration of your grieving experience, they're interconnected. Experiences of emotions, thoughts, and actions. You cannot truly separate, except for in a didactic way, grief and mourning. They come together. Grief and mourning are transactional. As we mourn, as we put words and actions to the emotions, the experience we have, our grief changes. And our mourning changes through our grieving, and our grieving changes through our mourning. It is interconnected. It is transactional. Change is the only constant. And because all emotions are a part of the grieving process, we can synthesize celebration. We can bring together these disparate things of joy with grief into celebration, because we've already said that mourning, one of the traditions of mourning, has a celebration of stepping back and honoring. So celebration itself doesn't require that it be joyous. Celebration means to honor, to give specialness, to see what is, to make time to communicate to ourselves and others what's of importance. So we can grieve both, we can celebrate both our grief of what we've lost, and we can celebrate with joy that which we've had. So dialectics lets us honor the spirit of the holiday through joyous celebration, while honoring the grief we feel through mourning. So what are some other pieces of DBT that might help us in this? One is radical acceptance, a strategy towards accepting the reality of our lives. Radical acceptance can be thought of as an antidote to suffering, in that suffering is what happens when we don't accept pain. Pain is a natural part of life. Grief is the natural response to loss. We can't avoid pain, and we can't stop grief. And if we try to do those things, if we try to deny it, if we try to live outside of reality, we compound the pain of the loss by adding this non-acceptance. We fight, we push, we disallow, we deny at every turn, and then we're suffering extra. So radical acceptance, full, complete, total, fully embodying acceptance, can move us back to a grief or a pain that honors the loss in an effective way that helps us move through. Radical acceptance in no way means that we approve. of the things we've lost, or that we're passive in it. Radical acceptance does not happen to you. One has to turn the mind toward being accepting, which is extremely difficult when you're in pain, extremely difficult when you do not approve that you have lost the things that you have. And it does not mean to say that it's okay, that you no longer have the child that you grieve, that you no longer have your physical function that you grieve. Radical acceptance does not mean that we say that those things are okay or didn't hurt us or forever alter our lives. We simply say we're going to look at them square and we're not going to try to act like they're not real. Because again, if we do that, we're prolonging the pain of our grief. We're prolonging our state of mourning, and we're going to have more suffering. So this radical acceptance, instead of fighting reality, invites us to enter fully into the process of grieving and mourning so that we can walk through it. So radical acceptance is also necessary for self-compassion, and self-compassion will come with radical acceptance. Both require a gentleness and a strength and a non-judgmental stance. One has to be courageous to radically accept that which is. And one has to take care to not judge ourselves as not mourning correctly or grieving correctly, or to judge others in how they present their grief and mourning. Radical acceptance and self-compassion they simply are. And both are a journey, not a destination. We practice radical acceptance. We practice self-compassion. We don't radically accept, period, put an end to the sentence. We are not self-compassionate, period, at the end of the sentence. They require renewal, and they require being awake to the moment. I'm sure that many of you have things that you have grieved, past tense, that again, maybe the holidays is the context, sometimes come back to you to be grieved again. And the same thing is true here. We need to open ourselves to radically accept and to open ourselves to be compassionate to ourselves. We nurture both radical acceptance and self-compassion by turning the mind, the heart, the soul towards this accepting stance. In the quiet moments of our daily lives and in the quiet moments of holiday, we pause, we notice, we open ourselves to just this moment on the moment's terms, on reality's terms. And we notice if we start to cringe or disavow, we open again with intention, we step forward to acknowledging. Now, this requires a dialectical approach itself, meaning we have to look at both the acceptance and the change. Accepting in this way radically requires that we also step back. That if we're going to, with active stance, accept our loss and grieve, we also have to have, with active stance, strategies to step away from that and soothe ourselves, distract ourselves, and seek comfort. To tip to one without acknowledging the other is not effective either. So it's a balance of acceptance and soothing. That'll allow us to move towards honoring our grief in the experiences of celebration. As I said earlier, celebration helps us to pay attention to things that matter. And grief matters. Our mourning of things that we've lost matters. And we want to be intentional about that. We want to be intentional in honoring and celebrating. So if you're a spiritual person, often an intention really can be a helpful path to opening ourselves, not so much to what's going to come our way, but to how we're going to participate in what comes our way. The only way through grief is through it. We can't bypass it and go around. So from that spiritual perspective, your intention about how you're going to relate to it and what might come your way because of it. We can be deliberate about how we want to experience the holiday this season, that we want to be open to the holiday. We want to be awake to our loved ones. We want to reflect on what we've lost because it matters, and we want to be present, perhaps in the joyous moment of the now. We can also really focus our experience on allowing it to be what it is. Don't require yourself to either celebrate or mourn in any particular moment. You can listen to your true self, your inner wisdom, your voice, to honor what you feel in each moment without judgment. There is no right way to approach the holidays when you're grieving. You must listen to yourself and allow yourself to be wise and to guide you. Balancing grief and joy. Both are true. Dialectics, both things are true. And recognize that this journey, this holiday season, has the potential for growth, and that you can share your experience of what you're learning about yourself and your path through grief and mourning. You can share that with trusted loved ones. And that itself, dialectics, is a transaction. Sharing who we are today heading into the holiday season and hearing other people's experience and feedback. That generates change. We see things in a new way. We experience things in a new light. And that itself can help ease us through profound grief with loss. So mourning and holiday celebration can be difficult. Watching others celebrate can be painful. It can be overwhelming, and it can cultivate anxiety for us about what's coming next in a holiday season. So having self-compassion, stepping back when needed to nurture yourself, is super important. Allowing your grief and mourning to be what it is, while also making room for joy and celebration. Feeling joy does not diminish the pain of your loss. Many people are frightened that if they allow that joy in, that it negates the impact of what has been lost. And dialectics tells us both can be true. It doesn't nullify. And that experiencing that joy often is what's needed to help you on the journey of continued grief and mourning if you have not traveled through it yet. So activities you can do to help cushion yourself is to talk with family and friends about what's coming up with the holiday celebrations. Are there particular activities that you want to include that would be meaningful to you? Are there specific activities that are just too painful that you'd like to exclude? Does it feel too painful to have a Christmas tree this year? Does it seem like too much to have a traditional family gathering? Decide what traditions are important to continue in new ways and build new ones that honor your loss. You could consider new rituals for mourning and bring them into the holiday. You could light a candle with intention or burn incense if that helps to honor. We know that there's going to be temptations to just cancel Christmas or cancel Hanukkah or cancel Kwanzaa. We can find a way to have both the grief that is how we feel and the celebration that might actually help us go through it. So what are some of those new holiday rituals that might help us move along? You know, it could be that you offer a moment of silence during a holiday toast. It could be that you go around a family table and ask for people to share a memory. In my family, we've had a special Christmas ornament that had a great, really actually a very funny and irreverent story about it, about how we got the ornament in the first place. And there's a special moment when that ornament goes on the tree. You could dedicate one Hanukkah candle in the memory of a loved one. Having family and friends contribute memories, in a photo album or a memory box. Another way that you can bring a new experience to the holiday when it feels too painful to carry it on the old way is to think about how to invite new people to join. Are there some family members that you don't see often, that often are alone on the holiday, that you could include? Or is there a way that you could include neighbors? Or is there someone that you could help? Could you contribute and put a little bit of the emphasis of the holiday season on others to help you both honor your grief and also step away from it? During this holiday season, it can just be difficult. I remember the first year after my father passed away, the idea of putting up the Christmas tree. I didn't feel it. I didn't see the point. Nothing mattered. And I told my family I wasn't going to get a tree. And that felt right in the moment. Unfortunately, I think it was the 24th at about 8 p.m., my grief overwhelmed me in a different way. And I suddenly felt lost and adrift, and that I was losing my father again because I didn't have a tree. I needed to put up those ornaments. My husband, good soul, we went looking for a Christmas tree at 8 p.m. on the 24th. We searched high and low. We went to store after store. We went to lot after lot. We could not find a tree to save our lives. And I was in tears, sobbing that I was now losing a connection to my father. At one store, we found a rosemary bush. It was the closest thing to a Christmas tree we could find. We brought that rosemary bush home and we decorated it. We somehow managed to put a string of Christmas lights on this little rosemary bush. And while I couldn't put all of my father's heirloom Christmas ornaments onto the rosemary sprigs, I could put a few of them. And I'll tell you, every year when I decorate our Christmas tree, it's with mindful attention that I hang those specific ornaments from the rosemary bush on the tree, and I feel so connected to my father. So there are ways that we can incorporate new traditions with old traditions. And there are ways where we can honor how we feel in the moment, no Christmas tree, and then try to get a Christmas tree and create something new. So give yourself grace that you will listen to what is needed. And hopefully you've got the support of family and friends around you to search high and low for your new tradition, rosemary bush. So here are some other things you can think about as you head into the holidays. Acknowledge that this is going to be difficult. Avoid the temptation to cancel the holiday. There's still room for you to be a part of it, maybe just in a different way. And you're going to give yourself breaks, take breathers, re-enter, step back again, take a break, take a breather, re-enter. Some people will find comfort with honoring those traditions, and others will find it too unbearable. Don't judge yourself. Do what is effective for you. Grieving is exhausting. Set realistic expectations for yourself and communicate your limits. If you can't make it to family dinner, even though you already said you were coming, don't go. You've got the freedom to make up your mind about what's going to be helpful for you. Focus on self-care and stick to routines. Having some normalcy during this time can be very comforting. Be mindful of the small joys, but don't just be mindful. When you're grieving, you have to actively look for them. I used to keep a little journal of my happy moments, and every day I'd ask myself to find something that gave me just a tiny little lift of happiness, and I'd write it down. And then on days where I couldn't remember anything that had brought me a little bit of joy, I could read my list, and it would usually help me to find something that I had actually experienced that day that brought me a little bit of joy. Ask for support and accept it from trusted loved ones. Communicate your needs. And families, listen, be available, and follow what your loved one says is going to be helpful to them this year. So there's many features to getting through grief during the holidays, and I've just hit on a few of them. If you're interested in looking at more ideas, here's a couple of resources I can suggest. There's a couple of great books on grief and the holidays, and I encourage you to check these out. Additionally, there are some online resources that might be a guide to support you. There's some links here in the Seattle area, which is where we're based, for bereavement support services, and also a link to the Center for Loss and Life Transitions, which has other resources beyond those that are traditional for bereavement. So with that, we're coming towards the close of our program and have time to move to some questions. So I will pause and allow our host, David Forbes, to organize this for us.
Thank you, Dr. K. That was a great presentation. And just as a reminder to everybody, we will be sending this presentation out, and we will have links to, if you missed those resources, we will have links to those resources in the email and in the presentation itself, so you will not miss them. Brandy, thank you. That's a wonderful comment. Brandy Banks said, thank you for sharing about your rosemary tree. Beautiful. So it is now open for question and answers. If you would like to submit a question, you can do it with the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So we have one that came through. I have a friend who lost their father a year ago at the holidays. I know that this is going to be a difficult first Christmas for her. Do you have recommendations for how I can support her this year?
Yeah, this is hard. I love it that you're asking the question because your heart is right there. You have to ask. It can be so difficult. Do I bring it up? Do I bring it up and draw their attention to what they've lost? Or do I wait for them to voice what they need? My recommendation to you is that you ask. You're not going to reactivate grief for somebody who's already grieving. It's perfectly comfortable and acceptable to say, hey, I know that this is a really tough year for you. I want to be helpful. What can I do? Know that many people that are grieving are not going to have the answer. So be prepared for some multiple choice. What can I do? Would it be helpful if I, went to your family gathering with you? Would that make it easier because there would be something to focus on? People would be talking to me because they don't know me well. Would that help take some of the pressure off of you in the family context? Would it be helpful to know that you can call me when you come home from your holiday celebration? You can just give me a call and tell me how it went. We can cry on the phone together, or I can tell you a joke. I'll get a book of really bad jokes, and I can tell you a joke to try to cheer you if that's helpful. The main thing that someone can do is to be there and to ask, how can I help? And then be ready to reinvent yourself, because the help that somebody in grief and mourning needs changes by the moment.
Thank you, Dr. K. We have another question. I did do a follow-up. I haven't heard back yet because I just want to get some clarity, but the suggestions if the grief is new and you simply don't know what you might need for support this year. And I'm guessing this is about the person asking the question and not somebody else. I was trying to get clarity, but I think that's what they are asking.
Yeah, so if
it's new for them.
Yeah, the loss has been very recent. And so grief itself is a new experience. This is going to sound possibly silly, but the first thing I'm going to say is drink a glass of water. People who are in active grief tend to not take self-care at the level of even hydration very well. And just even the activity of grieving, the body tension, the crying, the amount of energy that it takes to be at a state of grief can be extremely fatiguing and dehydrating. Fatigue can be dehydrating. So while it sounds silly, the first thing I would say is drink a glass of water, assuming you don't have any health issues. Drink an entire glass of water and then ask yourself, what do I need right now? And listen for the answer. Be kind, be patient, and allow yourself to have different answers come to you at different moments. You can guide yourself and reach out to family and friends for support, to even say, I don't even know what I need right now. Can you just listen to me say that out loud? Maybe we'll find what I need together. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, they did confirm that it was about the self, their grief, not somebody else's. Another question we have is, how do I explain to my school-age children that holidays this year aren't going to be the same due to trauma and loss?
Yeah. And we have woven through this presentation tonight that grief can be about things other than the passing of a loved one. And I know in these COVID times, many people have lost many things, loss of life for sure, but also we've lost our sense of confidence in our ordinary activities, like going to a restaurant. Many people have been impacted in ways where they've lost their livelihood, they've lost their economic stability, they've lost their housing. And so for many folks, there isn't the ability to celebrate or have presence or travel to see family and friends the way that there used to be. And talking with school-age children can be difficult. You know, with this pandemic as an example, things are more available to them than in many years past. So children have more understanding about loss these days because we've all, as a society, been experiencing so much of it. So I think using words that resonate with your kids, just being very straightforward that the things that the family has gone through that don't have the job that we used to, we can't purchase the things that we used to, we can't travel to go see grandma, just putting it very straightforward in language that they can understand. Kids are pretty resilient and they see and understand more sometimes than we as adults think. So be genuine, use language that's familiar for them, and give them the reassurance that everything will be different, because that's the one thing we know from dialectics: change is the only constant. Things will be different next year.
Okay, thank you. I've got two more. I want to make sure we get to them because I think they're important. So the first one that came in was, when experiencing multiple losses, prestigious job, death of a family member, divorce, new mental illness that is treatment resistant. It's impossible to talk to extended family members about these things, impossible to explain. How do I deal with them?
Yeah. And first, my heart goes out to you. That is a lot. You know, I think when you've got multiple things that are a part of your experience and you have a family that can't possibly understand, perhaps you can share one element with one person in the family, another element with another. The other thing that you can pay attention to is that everybody has had loss at some point in their lives, and many people have had multiple losses. But even if somebody has had only one loss, if they've got the capacity for empathy, they may be able to step into your shoes more than you think, to imagine how these things could compound. And with that much loss in one short period of time, I would also say maybe a grief support group might be helpful, to where you can get shared perspective of people who have walked the path that you're on.
Okay, thank you. The next one we have another one after this. I lost my 22-year-old son, Sean, in April of this year. When Thanksgiving came around, I'd asked for family to write down a memory of Sean to share it on Thanksgiving. Not one person did, and everyone avoided talking about him, and it hurt. I'm trying again for Christmas because we already bought plane tickets and made plans. How do I get my point across to them that I need this support? I don't want to gather and have everyone avoid talking about him again.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I got to tell you again, my heart goes out to you. Grief is so painful, and I'm sorry you lost Sean. That I can see why this is so impactful for you. You might, because this is so hard for you as the parent, is there a family member or a friend who understands this the way you do, in terms of how healing it could be for you to have this? This is too much pressure on you. I don't want to fragilize you. I don't even know you. I don't want to fragilize you. And this is too much pressure for you. You're going through your own grieving, and you're grieving also not having had what you needed at Thanksgiving. If you've got a friend who can advocate on your behalf and get this started, it could be that everyone is very anxious about how to do this. They want to be sensitive and loving, and they're also going through their version of this loss. A friend or a family member who can join with you to sort of activate everybody else might be the path to getting this in a way where it can be the celebration and the curative activity that you're yearning for.
All right, thank you. This last one is similar. Recently lost my daughter. My grieving journey has been up and down. It's hard to meet people. All right, I'm having my own moment, people. I apologize. I'm a father. This is hitting me hard.
It's okay. Don't apologize for your emotion. You're the host of this, and you're a human, and you're a father, and somebody has clearly had an experience that has touched you. No apology.
Izzy, can you please finish reading this one?
Yes, of course. The question is, recently lost my daughter. My grieving journey has been up and down. It's hard to meet people, friends, when they look at me and my family feeling sorry. I am not sure what to usually say or what to react.
Yeah. We, the bereaved, can be sources of confusion and fear for others, even when they're trying to connect to us, to support us. We can ignite that complexity of emotions for others. This journey is so hard, and it is extremely challenging for us to find ways to connect and for people to connect to us. I think that this is where, again, grief support groups can be effective, not always, but can be effective. It takes courage to reach out to them and to be genuine in where we are and what we need. But sometimes that shared brotherhood and sisterhood of joining a club that nobody wanted to join, especially the loss of a child, there can be a sense of place in those groups. My heart breaks for you. This is not the natural order of things to say goodbye to your child. And that support is so needed. I hope that you can connect with a group that can stand there with you and take some of your pain so that you don't have to carry it alone. I think what sometimes family and friends see in us is that the well of our misery is profound, and they're terrified that they won't be able to fill it. And they're right, they can't. We need them to know that we're not expecting that. We want people to stand by our side. We want people to bear witness to what is so painful, not fix it. Nothing can.
All right, thank you, Dr. K. We are a little over our time and we have no further open questions. There is one comment that I did want to address that about any links to grief support groups in Seattle or nationwide. I made a note. We will do some research on that. We'll send that out with the email that has the link both to the resources and this recording. So again, thank you everybody for your participation tonight. Thank you, Dr. K. That was a wonderful and informative presentation. Everyone, like I said, you will get an email in a few days with a link and some additional information. And thank you and have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah. Be well, best you can. Thank you.